All right, so I'm gonna remove the Ida fabric now since we're not gonna use that for this tutorial. The first step is to actually baste the waist canvas onto the fabric that you're gonna be using because it's near impossible, I would say, to stitch directly onto this fabric and keep it very uniform and within the same distance from each other in terms of each stitch. So that's why you use the waist canvas, because it serves as your guide in the same way that Ida fabric has a grid that you can follow. So first step first is you're gonna wanna cut out a piece of waist canvas that is big enough to hold your design. So you can cut this however way you want. Do not worry about that. It's ultimately going to be removed anyways. So I went ahead and cut out a smaller piece because I'm only gonna do one small motif on this fabric. And you're gonna decide where you want to stitch the fabric, the Tatreez. So you wanna determine where it is, and then you're gonna go ahead and baste it onto this fabric. In order to baste it, you're going to be using your sewing thread. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut out a piece of sewing thread, and you can do it in the same way that you cut out your embroidery floss, one arm's length if that makes sense to you, or however long that works best for you and your practice. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out. I'm gonna grab my needle, and you're gonna go ahead and thread your needle. And because this particular thread will be removed anyways, you don't need to worry too much about how it looks or how, what the knots look like, for example. So I'm just gonna knot it together in the best way that I can and go ahead and start stitching. All right, now that my knot is good to go, I'm gonna basically stitch very simply. I'm gonna do a straight stitch and just basically sew this waist canvas onto this fabric here. So it's exactly as it seems, it's that simple. You're gonna just grab both pieces of fabric, make sure they're lined up, and be aware of the angle at which your waist canvas is going to be attached, because this will be your guiding factor. So if you have it at an angle, the design that you do will also be at that angle. So the way that I like to do it typically is I like to line it up with the seam or with an edge of the fabric, and that way I know that it's going to be as straight as possible. If you want to put it in the middle of a fabric, a nice trick that you can do is just fold it in half, get a sense of where the middle is, and you'll use that as your middle point for this waist canvas, just as a general rule of thumb. But then once you have it aligned, you're gonna start, and I typically like to sew the waist canvas on one side first against this grain line, and that way I know that it's tacked on foundationally and in the direction that you want it to go. So it's literally going to be very, very simple. You're just gonna go somewhere in the corner and pull your needle through so that you get your knot to stop at the end. And then once you do that, you can go ahead, continue straightening it as you go. And I'm just gonna go, usually it's like every 5 to 10 stitches away. I use kind of these markers as a way to guide me as well. And apologies on this gray thread being very hard to see, but you can see it in the back. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that for the entire length of this particular piece. And again, it will move, so make sure that you're constantly keeping it straight as possible. All right, do maybe 2 more here. And then once you get to the end of one place, you're gonna basically just switch sides and keep going. So your goal is just to make a little square around, holding it in place. Now, when you're using bigger pieces of waist canvas, the trick with this is going to be making sure that you eliminate any bubbling forming inside. And you also want to just keep this waist canvas very, very tight against this fabric, because for whatever reason your basting is off, and let's say this is a very small piece, so it's kind of hard to mess up, but let's say you have a bigger piece and you put it in and then you go on one side and then you don't really quite go around and it kind of goes wonky, like that will impact your stitching as well, and it'll impact your stitches. So you want want to make sure that this waist canvas is as flat as possible against the fabric as you're basting it on. And you're going to want to keep this baste very, very tight against it so that it doesn't move. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of this, and I'll show you kind of what the finished product looks like. Okay, I've completed basting my waist canvas onto the fabric, so you can see that it's completely attached. When you look at the back, it's a lot clearer to view. So again, it's like not very straight, they're not uniform at all, it's not meant to be pretty, it's literally just meant to hold your waist canvas in place as you're stitching. And so I actually typically will not even tie this end, because eventually you are going to remove it when you're about to remove the waist canvas. So I would literally just cut out this this thread, and I would leave it just hanging like this, because eventually we will remove it. You don't want to by accident, you know, unfortunately, like get it sewn into your Tatreez, or it gets loose or something. So just keep an eye on it if you do this method. Otherwise, if you really want to, you can totally tie it against one of these previous spots. That's totally an option as well. Eventually though, you are going to remove it, so you'll have to cut it off if you do knot it in the back. All right, so now that you have your waist canvas attached to your material, it'll be ready to do the Tatreez. And actually, before I go into that, I just wanted to mention, if you are doing a larger piece of waist canvas, you don't necessarily have to go in a square like this. So this works because the space is so small. But if you're doing a larger piece, like let's say you're doing a tote bag, like I mentioned before, you don't necessarily want to just go on the outer edges, because that will cause bubbling inside. So what you can do is you can do every, like, I would say like every 3 inches or so, you can do a line of basting, so that it's like 3 inches like this of basting. And then you can do it again also on this side, just to make sure that the waist canvas is very, very tight against the fabric. There's no right or wrong answer here. Again, like this is not supposed to be pretty at all. It's just meant to do, it's serving a purpose. It's not meant to be visually appealing. So however it looks like for you is fine. I remember when I did my ebbe, I actually did a very big X down the middle so that I would have the thing in the middle of the fabric itself. And then I did a few kind of coming out like this to really just keep the waist canvas directly attached to the material itself. All right, so the next video I will show you how I'm stitching using waist canvas. It's not very different from stitching on Ida fabric, but I can walk you through some tips and tricks to make it as painless as possible.